My husband and mother-in-law thought the house was theirs when they threatened me with divorce, but now they can move in together to pursue their unhealthy relationship because it's been my inheritance. I'm Katie, a 30-year-old office worker who somehow ended up in a situation worthy of a TV sitcom. I'm a working woman, that's me, married to a man who's still tied to his mom's skirts, that's my husband Gary, and a mother-in-law who thinks she's the Queen of England. I know what you're thinking. Katie, dear, why did you marry a mama's boy? Well, let me tell you, love makes you blind, deaf, and seemingly dumb. When I first met Gary at university, he seemed like a dream come true. Tall, handsome, and able to form full sentences. A rare find in the untamed jungle of higher education. A few years later, here I am living in a beautiful $2 million home with my husband and our daughter. The house I inherited from my father sounds like a fairy tale, doesn't it? Well, hold on tight, because this is where it gets interesting. You see, my darling husband and his loving mother seem to be under the impression that this beautiful, spacious house is worth every penny of that $2 million is thanks to Gary's hard work and his mother's impeccable taste. But before I reveal the juicy details of how I got away with the scam of the century, let me take you on a journey through the hilariously frustrating and downright absurd events that led me to the moment I finally decided to drop the most epic truth bomb. I was an excited college student with way too many expectations when I met Gary. Armed with nothing but a dream, a stack of textbooks, and an unhealthy addiction to coffee shop coffee, Gary stalked into my life looking like a knight in shining armor, if that armor was made of football jerseys and beer cans. Our eyes met across a crowded classroom, and it was love at first sight. Well, okay, it wasn't really that romantic. He spilled his energy drink all over my notes, and I may have said a few words that would make a sailor blush. But hey, nothing says true love like ruined notes and sticky fingers. From that moment on, we were inseparable. The first hint of Gary's unusual relationship with his mother came on our third date. Imagine the scene, dinner by candlelight, soft music, and us both gazing lovingly into each other's eyes. Suddenly, Gary's phone rings. He ignores it, like anyone else, either agrees to a date or not. Our Gary practically leaps across the table to answer it. "Hello, Mum," he says, with all the enthusiasm of a Labrador seeing its owner after 5 minutes apart. What followed was a 15-minute conversation about whether he'd remembered to pack his lucky underwear for exam week. I wish he was joking, I really did, but I ran for the hills like any self-respecting woman would. I didn't stand there sipping my cheap lukewarm wine thinking, how sweet, he loves his mom. Katie from the past, if I could go back in time and slap some sense into you, I would, and loud. The years go by, and suddenly we're engaged. How did that happen, you might wonder? Well, let's just say it involved a hidden ring, a botched proposal speech that mentioned his mom no less than 5 times, and me, in my infinite wisdom, saying yes. The wedding planning phase was an experience, and by experience, I mean a nightmare peppered with passive-aggressive comments from my future mother-in-law. So friends, this is where Carol really started to shine. Every decision, from the color of the napkins to the flavor of the cake, had to be approved by Carol. God forbid we chose lilac. The location of the sash to the bridesmaids' dresses, Carol nearly had an aneurysm. And Gary? Well, he was about as helpful as a hot chocolate teapot. Every time I tried to ask his opinion on something, he would just shrug and say, "Whatever you and Mom think is best, darling." I should have known then that not only was I marrying Gary, but entering into a polygamous relationship with him and his mother. But the real fun started when we started house hunting. Most couples look for a house together. Maybe they take an estate agent or a trusted friend along for a second opinion. Not us. That would be too normal. We took Carol. But the coup de grace was when we finally found a house that we all approved of. And by everyone, I mean Carol gave her approval, and I was too exhausted to continue arguing. While we were in the living room, Carol turned to Gary with tears in her eyes and said, "Oh, honey, I can see our family gathered here on Christmas morning. Our family, not your family, ours. I was right there, and somehow I had already been erased from the picture." Gary corrected her. "Of course not." He just nodded, probably imagining himself in his barefoot pajamas, opening presents while his lovely mummy watched him with twinkling eyes. By now, you're probably wondering why I didn't just run for it. Believe me, I've asked myself that question approximately 37,042 times since then. But love, lack of sleep from all the house calling, and the sunk costs fallacy are a dangerous combination. So Against all better judgment, and probably various laws of nature, we got married. The wedding was, well, let's just say, if you look up the word circus in the dictionary, you'd find a picture of our bridal party. Carol wore white. Yes, you read that right. White. To her son's wedding. When I pointed it out to Gary, he just shrugged and said, "Mom says it's more of an off-white." Off-white. My nose was whiter than a polar bear in a blizzard, but we made it. We said our I do's, we cut the cake, and embarked on our new life together, and by together, I mean with the constant presence of Carol lurking in the background. Now, you would think once we were married and settled into our new house, the one Carol chose, remember, things would calm down. No. Married life with Gary was like being in a three-legged race, except the third leg was Carol's, and she was always trying to trip me up. She was everywhere. If not physically present, she was in spirit, living rent-free in Gary's head and dictating every aspect of our lives. We wanted to buy a new sofa? Best to check with Carol first. Thinking about trying a new recipe for dinner? Or not. Gary only likes his meals the way his mom makes them. You wanted to paint the guest room. Calm down, young lady. Maybe Carol won't like that color combination. And before I knew it, I was pregnant. Now, most women enjoy their pregnancies, have baby showers, decorate the nursery, and bask in the glow of the impending motherhood. I enjoyed Carol's constant commentary on everything I ate, drank, or did. Apparently, when you're expecting precious Gary Jr., you can't make decisions for yourself anymore. "Oh, Katie, you really should be drinking coffee. I never touched that crap when I was pregnant with Gary." Well, maybe that explained how Gary turned out then. "Katie, dear, are you sure you want to paint the nursery that color? Studies show it could affect a baby's cognitive development." Again, Gary seems to have tried some of that paint too, and Gary was nodding along to everything his mom said. I swear, if Carol had told him that standing on his head and singing "I'm a Teapot" would ensure a healthy baby, he would have been upside down singing nursery rhymes before you could say umbilical cord. The day I went into labor, it was quite an experience. I was huffing and puffing, trying not to swear at every man on the planet, and guess who walked into the delivery room? Carol. Gary had called her before the hospital. No joke. His first instinct when his wife went into labor was call his mom. He'd say that I was shocked, but by this point she was too busy trying to give birth to Care. There I was, bringing a new life into the world with my husband on one side looking like he was going to faint at any moment, and my mother-in-law on the other offering pearls of wisdom like, "Now, Katie, when I gave birth to Gary, I didn't make half a sound." Having a baby, it only gave Carol more ammunition. Now not only was she a bad wife, she was also a bad mother. Every decision she made was wrong. She didn't feed the baby well. She didn't change the baby properly. She didn't sing the right songs. It was a never-ending barrage of criticism, all delivered with that saccharine smile that made me fantasize about pushing her into a barrel of quick-dry cement. Gary was delighted. He had his mom and his daughter under one roof. The fact that his wife was losing it seemed to be completely beyond him. It was around this time that I realized I needed to make a change, not for my sake, or not, I was too far gone, but for my daughter. I refused to raise a child who thought it was normal for her father to consult his mother for every decision. I refused to let him grow up believing that his worth depended on how well he lived up to his mother-in-law's impossible standards. So I did what any sensible woman would do. I changed jobs. Yes, you read that right. I quit my well-paying, stable job with irregular hours for a position that paid less but gave me more time at home because I was determined to be there for my daughter in a way that Gary never would be. Of course, Carol had a lot to say about that decision. "Oh, Caddy, are you sure that's a good idea? How are you going to maintain Gary's lifestyle on that salary?" As if Gary's lifestyle of playing video games and consulting his mom on what sock to wear requires a six-figure income to support. But I stood my ground. For the first time since I met Gary, I made a decision without considering what Arrow Carol might think. But don't worry, this is not the end of the story. Oh no, we're just getting started. Remember that $2 million house I mentioned? That's where things really start to get interesting. But more on that later. For now, I need a nice stiff drink and possibly a lobotomy to forget the image of Carol in her off-white wedding dress. Update one last time.
I left you with the birth of my daughter and my brilliant decision to change jobs. Now fast forward a bit to when things really started to heat up. There we were, a happy family of 3, or 4 if you count Carol, which apparently Gary always did. Our daughter was growing faster than Gary's mountain of dirty laundry, and we were starting to feel a bit cramped in our current place. You know, the house that Carol had so generously chosen for us newlyweds. One fine day over a breakfast of burnt toast, my darling husband said something to me that nearly made me choke on my charcoal-tasting crust. "Honey," he said with all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop, "I've been thinking. Mom is getting older and I'm worried about her future. How about we look for somewhere we can all live together?" Now, I pride myself on being a reasonable person. I've put up with Carol's constant meddling, Gary's inability to make decisions without consulting the mothership, but this was just too much. I tried to reason with him. I pointed out that Carol was older than she was, like a fine wine full of preservatives, and would probably outlive us all. I reminded him that you value, but not Gary. He was determined. He had a whole speech prepared about family values and looking after our elders. I'm pretty sure Carol had written it for him and made him practice in front of a mirror. I was faced with a choice. Accept, live with the woman who had made it her mission in life to criticize every aspect of my existence, or be the evil daughter-in-law who denied sweet Carol the joy of watching her granddaughter grow up. But your friend Caddy is not one to go down without a fight either. I put my adult pants on and proposed a compromise. We would look for a house, of course, but it would be close to Carol's current house, not in it. Close enough for frequent visits, but far enough away that I could pretend the doorbell was broken when I needed a respite from sanity. Surprisingly, Gary agreed. I suspect he was just relieved that I hadn't immediately filed for divorce or committed him to a mental hospital for even suggesting we live with his mother. Now remember, as I mentioned before, I inherited a house from my dad. Well, this is where things get interesting. You see, I hadn't told Gary about this little inheritance. Why, you might ask? Well, partly because I knew that the moment Carol found out, she'd be redecorating the place in her mind, but mostly because, well, I guess I wanted something that was just mine. So I suggested we look at houses in the area where the property I'd inherited just happened to be. Gary wasn't suspecting a thing. He was too busy making sure every property we went to had a suitable room for his mom's extended stays. Eventually, we decided on a house. And when I say decided, I mean I managed to convince Gary and Carol that the house I'd inherited was on the market and was perfect for us. Because of course having a bigger house didn't deter Carol, it just gave her more space to spread her special madness. She started visiting us all the time. At first it was just once a week, then twice, then every other day. Soon I was looking for excuses to work late just to avoid coming home to find her reorganizing my cupboards or lecturing me on the proper way to fold fitted sheets. Gary was delighted. He had his mom always around cooking his favorite meals and generally treating him like he was still a 12-year-old who needed his mom to cut the sides off his sandwiches. About 3 months after we moved in, I came home one day to find Carol had let herself in and was in the middle of repainting our living room. "Okay, T, you've arrived," she said cheerfully, as if breaking and entering someone's house and redecorating was a totally normal thing to do. "I hope you don't mind, but that almond color was so boring. I thought a nice mauve would jazz it up." "Mommy, Mommy, look what Grandma got me." And there in my daughter's arms was the ugliest, cheesiest dress I'd ever seen. My daughter loved it. Looking at my mauve walls, at my daughter's beaming smile, and Carol's pleased face, I realized something had to change. And since it's legally frowned upon to throw your mother-in-law out of a window, I knew it was me who needed to change. It all started with a phone call from my mom. Now, let me take a moment to appreciate my mom. Compared to Carol, she is a Santa. Calls me once a week, he remembers my birthday without Facebook reminding him, and he's never once insinuated that his way of loading the dishwasher is superior to mine. But this call was different. Her health and my dad's had been declining for a while, and things had taken a turn for the worse. They were struggling to take care of themselves. If they really needed help, I did what any good daughter would do. Adjusted my work schedule, kissed my daughter, and prepared to split my time between my house and my parents. Gary's response was what you might expect. He mumbled something about how difficult it would be for him to manage without me, as if he was the one balancing a job, a daughter, and 2 sick parents. He even had the nerve to suggest that maybe Carol could come stay with us full-time to help out, but he didn't have time for a couple. He had parents to look after, a daughter to raise, and a job to hold down. So I did what women have done since the beginning of time. Took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and moved on. What I wasn't expecting was Carol's reaction to my new schedule. You would think that she would be delighted. After all, I was out of the house more often, which gave her free rein to redecorate as she pleased and fuss over her precious little boy, but not for her. The fact that I prioritized my own parents meant that in some ways I was taking care of my duties as a wife and mother. I wasn't spending enough time with my daughter. The house was a mess. Gary was eating too much takeout. Everything blew up one night when I came home late from my parents' house, exhausted and emotionally drained, and found Carol in my kitchen, her lips pursed in disapproval. "Katie," she said in that saccharine voice that made me want to commit felonies, "I think we need to talk about your priorities." And there, Reddit darlings, I'll leave you for now, because what happened next? Well, that's a whole other story. Update 2. I was in my kitchen, so tired I could barely see straight. I had spent the day between work calls, changing my dad's IV, and trying to convince my mom that she needed to eat something other than stale crackers and sadness. And now here was Carol, looking at me and accusing me. What came out of my mouth was a surge of frustration, rage, and enough swear words to make up for new curses. It was like a dam had burst and years of pent-up resentment came flooding back. Carol didn't cake it well. Her face went through more colors than a chameleon in a bag of candy. Then in walked Gary. He was ready to defend my honor and put his mother in her place. Of course not. Gary took one look at the scene, his wife red with fury and possibly foaming at the mouth, and his gorgeous mom looking like she was about to pass out on the nearest couch. And guess what he did? He sided with her. In the big showdown between his wife and his mother, Dar chose his mom. He started giving me a speech about respect, family values, and how I was tearing this family apart with my selfish behavior. But Gary wasn't finished, or he didn't save the best for last. In a move I'm sure he thought was his trump card, he threw in this little gem. "Oh, and remember, if you ever wanted a divorce, you, Katie, and our daughter couldn't manage on your own. Do you understand?" Oh, my sweet Gary, you just blew it. Monumentally. Me. I laughed. Gary and Carol looked at me like I'd finally lost my mind. And maybe I had. But in losing it, I also found something. My spine. Once I could breathe again, I straightened up. Darling, who said I'd be the one who didn't?
Would sort it out? The confusion on their faces was priceless. You could practically see the hamster wheels spinning in their heads, trying to process what I had just said. And that's when I dropped the biggest truth bomb. I told them everything about the house, about how it wasn't just any house, but a $2 million estate I had inherited from my father, about how every mortgage payment, every tax bill, and every leaky faucet repair had been paid for with my money. Gary's face went from confusion to disbelief, then to something suspiciously like fear. Carol, on the other hand, went from shock to outrage, then settled on a calculating interest rate that gave me the creeps. But I wasn't over. I was on a roll, and nothing short of an act of God was going to shut me up. I explained everything, how I'd been biting my tongue for years, putting up with Carol's interference and Gary's spineless state, how I'd changed jobs, sacrificed my career, and bent over backwards to accommodate their every whim. And for what? Why they should treat me like a maid. A glorified maid in my own house. I made it very clear that things were going to change. No more surprise visits from Carol, no more redecorating without my permission, no more treating me like I was a charity case, that I should be grateful for any crumbs of affection they decided to give me. And to Gary, I made it clear that he had a decision to make. He could either start behaving like a husband and father, or he could pack his bags and go live with his loving mom. Because I was fed up. Fed up. Carol predictably burst into crocodile tears, screaming that she had only wanted the best for the family. She couldn't believe I had cheated on them. How could she be so cruel to poor sweet Gary? Gary, for his part, looked as if he'd been hit by a truck. He babbled, he stammered, and even tried to argue that surely, as my husband, he had some right to the house. I did what any sensible woman would do in my situation.
I called a solicitor. The kind of solicitor that makes other solicitors wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. Because if Gar thought I was going to intimidate me with threats of divorce, he was in for a surprise. My lawyer assured me that not only was the house completely mine, but if Gar wanted to push for a divorce, he'd be lucky to walk away with anything more than the clothes on his back. Of course, this is real life, not a movie, so things didn't magically get resolved overnight. Gary, in an amazing display of survival instinct, seemed to realize he'd put his foot in it. He started talking about couples therapy, patching things up because he loved me and our daughter. As for Carol, well, let's just say she didn't take too kindly to her new persona non grata status. She tried everything: emotional blackmail, love bombing, even a half-hearted attempt at sorry, but I kept my house and my rules said no more Carol. I realized that by standing up for myself, refusing to be a welcome mat once again, I was teaching my daughter the most valuable lesson of all, that she deserves respect. She doesn't have to put up with abuse from anyone, not even family, especially family. Now, I know you're all dying to know what happened next. Well, my dear curious ones, that's a story for another day. For now, let's just say life is interesting. Challenging, yes, but also liberating in ways I never thought possible. I'm rediscovering who I am, and Gary's expectations and Carol's constant criticism weighing on me. So if you're out there, dealing with your own Gary or Carol, remember this: you are worth more than you know. You deserve more than you think. And sometimes the most liberating thing you can do is just stand up and say no more. Edit: holy crap, this blew up overnight. I can't believe how many of you are so invested in my drama. Your comments and messages have me alternating between laughing out loud and ugly crying into my glass of wine. Thank you all for the support, the advice, and the truly creative suggestions on what I should do with Carol's house key. No, I'm not going to glue it inside a fish and mail it to her, although the temptation is strong. To answer some common questions, yes, I'm keeping the house. It's mine by all rights, and no tantrum from toddler Gary is going to change that. No, I haven't kicked Gar out yet. We're in some kind of limbo, weird, where he's trying to convince me he can change, and I'm trying to decide if I even want him to. Carol is banned from the house for the time being. I've informed her that if she shows up uninvited again, I won't hesitate to call the police. That bitch-face chronicle she put on was epic, believe me.
Many who have asked for Carol's number because she sounds attractive, please get help. Seriously. Yes, I have changed the locks and the security code for those asking about my daughter. She is fine. The children are resilient, and I am making sure she knows none of this is her fault. In fact, she seems happier since Carol's visit stopped. What a surprise. And finally, to the person who suggested I write a book, don't tempt me. 50 Shades of Mauve, the story of a mother-in-law, has a nice touch, doesn't it? Thanks again, Reddit. Your support means more than you can imagine. I will update when I can, but for now, I have a life and a lot of bad to paint over. Update 3. I am back because I know how long you have been waiting for the conclusion to this story and the wonderful marriage that I had. If you can notice the sarcasm. I bet you wanted to know if Gary stayed with me or his lovely mum. Well, let me tell you, he never really had a choice. Although, to be honest, if he had, he would probably have chosen his mum. Luckily, shortly after my last update, the divorce papers were ready to be presented to him. The look on Gary's face when he got the papers, and it was just as funny as you can imagine. A mix of surprise, concern, and confusion, like he couldn't believe what was happening. He acted like divorce was the strangest thing in the world, like he didn't see it coming. Honestly, the strangest thing is that I didn't file for divorce much sooner. What's weird is that I even married him in the first place, or that he didn't run away the first time he showed clear signs of being a mama's boy. Along with the divorce papers, as expected, came an eviction notice. I wasn't going to allow him to continue living in my house one day longer than necessary. The good news for him was that he didn't have to move far. His new, old address was right where we all expected: his mom's house. Of course, I made that comment thinking that it would be good news for him. I mean, what could be better than living with his loving mother? Oddly enough, he wasn't amused. Well, I had no idea. I thought he'd enjoy it with all the emotional incest. Why? Well, it's just emotional, right? Fortunately, it didn't take him long to leave. It only took him a few days to pack and move, probably because he already had some clothes in the house. Of her mother. The reason, I don't want to know, nor am I interested. Once she left, everything moved forward as it should. The divorce process took a few months, as these things usually do, but it was finally completed. I kept the house because it was never a marital asset, it was an inheritance from my father, and for those who ask, it is possible to inherit something if the person is still alive. As for the rest of our belongings, we divide them fairly, but the best thing of all is that Gary now has to pay child support. This was a huge relief because I was starting to consider looking for a better paying job to support my daughter and I. Now that he is out of the equation, however, thanks to child support, we can cover the difference without worrying too much. Plus, now that her mother can no longer enter this house or interfere in our lives, there is a significant savings. It's incredible what can be achieved when you expel an emotional parasite. As expected, Carol tried to come back and see her granddaughter, but she was very clear. If she wants to see her, she can do so during the time she spends with her dad. I made it clear that there is no place for her in this house, and yes, maybe I was a little harsh, but I told him that dangerous animals are not allowed here. The expression on his face when I said this was almost as good as Gary receiving divorce papers. Regarding custody of our daughter, we came to an agreement. She spends the week with me and the weekends with her father. Although, let's be realistic, that time is mostly spent with her grandmother since Gary still lives with Carol and hasn't made an attempt to move out despite it being several months since he left my house. For the rest, I must say things are much better now. Once you get rid of what's poisoning your life, everything starts to look up. It's like I've been carrying a backpack full of rocks for years, and when you let go, everything is suddenly easier. I no longer have to walk on eggshells in my own house, or live under the constant shadow of Carol's criticism. My daughter is calmer, and although it can be difficult for her, having divorced parents, I think she feels the difference too without her grandmother's constant interference in our space. Now the house finally feels like my home. And in case you were wondering, yes, I finally got rid of every trace of mauve in the house. That paint was the first thing to disappear once Gary left. Freedom has a color, and I can assure you it's not mauve.